Being in this business for so long, what I have learned is the major pitfall is that we get tired. We get
Mhm.
tired and we get jaded from dating. So I'm doing everything I can to help my clients not get tired and jaded.
Thank you so much for tuning in again to Second Act TV. So happy to welcome back Laurie Gerber, the dating coach, relationships expert, and you were or still are a resident expert on a lot of the dating sites, which gives you even more of a unique perspective on a lot of stuff that we're going to talk about today. So, Laurie, thank you for joining us again.
My pleasure. I am not currently. And what it does give me is a breadth of experience with tens
Mhm.
of thousands of daters.
So, Lori, on our last segment, we discussed what is your type. Do you actually know what you're looking for when you are dating? Very interesting segment. I will link to it so you have some of the basics here that will apply to our discussion today, which is first date tips and mistakes, as well as the second and the third date. If I'm quoting you directly here, the first three dates are the most important dates.
They're kind of the only important dates, in my opinion, in terms of determining your type, right? Determining whether or not you're with your type. So
Mhm.
our last segment was all about figuring out for yourself what your type is. This segment is really about figuring out, is this person your type?
Well, let's talk about specifically then what quote you should or shouldn't do, the do's and don'ts of first, second, and third dates. Let's start here right at the beginning. That whether you're doing the asking, meaning our men or women for that matter, that's a whole other segment, or you're being asked on a date, that dinner is unnecessary. That's one of the big mistakes.
Being in this business for so long, what I have learned is the major pitfall is that we get tired. We get
Mhm.
tired and we get jaded from dating. So I'm doing everything I can to help my clients not get tired and jaded. I don't want you stuck in a 2 or 3 hour dinner. Now, and it sometimes I will say there are some exceptions where somebody is chivalrous, especially
Mhm.
we're talking about people over 50. They still have some more what I would consider old-fashioned ideas about dating and they really want to take you to dinner. And maybe
Right.
they're lonely and maybe they want a night out even if you're not the person. You
Mhm.
don't have to say that yes to that. It's not a deal breaker if you say yes to a dinner, but I only want you going on dates with someone you have chemistry and rapport with. So first of all, you need to have a video chat first to see if there's chemistry and if you're attracted and if they're real. And second, when you go on that date, I recommend smoothie, coffee, tea. And then if
Mhm.
you're really into it, you can take a walk and then you can have dinner. So I'm not against a traditional first date. I am against a traditional first date of dinner if you are not attracted, if you are
Mhm.
not having good synergy.
Yeah, and that's really good advice for our guys too, because still, especially in our age group, they're still the one doing the paying, or they feel awkward if they don't, and that can add up fast. So
Truly,
why?
truly.
Yeah, yeah. Why do that? And you're, as you said, you're stuck. You're stuck. If one of you wants out, it's difficult to leave a dinner.
Right. It's like the old joke of, call me at 7 and say
Yeah,
there's an emergency. It's
yeah,
like not
yeah.
necessary if you're having a coffee. And you only need 20 minutes to see, is the banter
Mhm.
good? Am I attracted? Could I imagine kissing this person? Right. You don't need 2 hours. 2 hours
Right.
and people are planning 2 hour dinner dates because they're lonely, not because they know you're the person for them.
Well, my first date with my boyfriend, we're now together 13 years. Yeah, it was going to be a drink, and then we talked for 4 hours. So it
Yeah,
can happen.
exactly. Short can turn long, but long is very hard to turn short.
Exactly. And then number two here, the second mistake, a lack, and this is really something to think about, a lack of preparation. Do we ever really think about preparing for a date other than what we're going to wear and how our makeup is going to look?
So much on that.
Yeah.
So much on hoo-ha, not enough on head and heart.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And it's and what people have trouble with the most people, I think that's a generalization that's accurate, is what to talk about.
right. A lot of debate about this. I would go back to the first segment you and I did together to
Mm-hmm.
review. There are three voters in all of us. The head
Right.
is voting on, is this practical? Does this look good on
Mm-hmm.
paper? The heart is voting on, how does it feel? And the hoo-ha or the he is voting on, am I attracted? Does this turn me on? The good news is the hoo-ha is kind of becomes self-evident. I'm hoping in a video chat and certainly in an in-person date, you don't have to ask, You don't have to ask a lot, right? You can kind of see
Mhm.
it, you can feel it. You have to ask yourself, do I want to kiss this person? Am I attracted? But
Mhm.
for the heart and the head, you need to have pre-designed your questions. And people
Mhm.
really are not good at this. I cannot believe that people still go into a date asking yes or no questions. Do you want to retire soon? Do you like hiking? Do, beach
Mhm.
or mountains, right? Like questions that do not elicit interesting answers. And I give a
Right.
boilerplate list. You
Mhm.
can have a boilerplate list.
Right. No, you had some really interesting ones that I want to talk about. Give something specific to our viewers. Like you had like how do you spend most weekdays? That's really important, especially at our age. If we're retired or halfway there, that can tell you a lot.
And it's so much better than saying, what did you do for a living? Or what do you do for a living? Or what do you do? It's the language is actually so much more inviting to
Hmm.
somebody. Because again, men are thinking women are trying to find out how much money do I have and how's my prostate. And women are thinking he's trying to find out how fast can I have sex and will you take care of me? Right? Like everyone's got the stereotypes that the other one that we think we're asking the questions for. So if you can ask questions that don't put someone on the defensive or feel like they have a right answer, that's gold, right? What's an ideal Sunday for you? Wow, how do you spend your weekdays? What's your favorite thing about your siblings? That's
Hmm.
fascinating. What do your friends go to you for? You don't go, do you have friends? Like and that's what they want to know. They want to know, do you have friends? But you don't say that. You don't say that. That's rude.
I think, there's two questions that I think everybody wants answered when you first start. I mean, I think they're going to come up, and we need to either think about how we're going to answer them or how
Right.
to avoid them. And that is, how long have you been divorced, or about your status? How long have you been single? Maybe if you've never been married or divorced.
But what they really want to know is why are you single? And they really want to know, are you really available? That's what they really want to
Yes.
know. And there are better ways to find that out and ask that. How long have you been divorced doesn't tell you anything. That's a number. What did you learn from your marriage? What was the divorce like for you? Those are
Mhm.
questions that are not only going to give you the more of the answers you want, but it's going to make the person think and show up as themselves in a way they can't even avoid it because you're asking them a question they didn't pre-think of. You have to have your answers prepared too. And let me tell you, if you don't, you're not even going to want to go on dates. I was coaching some friends of mine in the car over this past weekend, and each of them had to create, I call it a spiel, right? Like each of
Mhm.
them needed a spiel on herpes, divorce, why I've never been married, right? Like those are things you need a quick, honest,
Yes.
upbeat spiel about. And if you don't have one yet, it's either because you're not ready to date yet, which is fine, or you haven't thought about it and practiced on a friend. But you need that for dating. Not just because the other person wants to know and they need to know, but to boost your confidence.
And what that will tell you, again, in my opinion, if you prepare yourself with these questions, and as you just said, ask yourself how you would answer that. You'll also know whether you should ask that in the first place, which is something I learned when I read through like some of your questions. Is I wouldn't want to be asked this.
Oh, tell me the ones you didn't want to be asked.
Well, like, okay, if you could change one thing about yourself, what would that be? That would annoy me. Where somebody else
I think
might really
that's a third date question. That's a good third
okay.
date, right? Once you have, because remember, if you like someone and that person's going to work for your life, then you really actually want to fast forward getting to know them. Especially since I don't recommend having sex until you really do get to know them, because then the sex will be better. It then behooves you to really actually talk about what doesn't work about you, not just what you love about yourself, because that's going
Hmm.
to come out anyway, eventually.
Right, exactly. No, it's interesting. Like I said, I'm not putting a right or wrong on it. It's just it's interesting what that could evoke in someone. So if it's something that's uncomfortable for you, it may not be uncomfortable for the other person. But if you can't answer it either, then I would suggest to
Well, then
stay away
definitely
from
don't
it.
ask it if you don't want to answer it.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly, exactly. Well, then of course, one big reminder in whatever you talk about is to stay away from any negativity, right?
Right. So again, the problem we have is that we don't actually resolve our past baggage and we bring
Hmm.
it with us in heavy suitcases to our current date. And then our date can tell something's wrong or something's off or something doesn't feel good, but they don't know why because they didn't do anything. So we want to keep our past in the past, which doesn't mean they're not going to eventually find out all our stories. They are, those are
Hmm.
not secrets. But if you come in with negativity, they're going to know you're not resolved and you're not truly emotionally available. So I'm not saying hide it. I'm saying actually do the work to get resolved.
From interviewing so many different people on this show, Laurie, relationship experts, dating coaches, therapists, whatever, there seems to be a diverse opinion on talking about your ex on the first date or asking about it. I think that if you are divorced, again, this is my opinion, everybody does want to know.
Right.
But what do you recommend? Do you stay away
I
from
So I prefer what have you learned in your past relationships, because then if they're ready to talk about the divorce, they can, and if they're not, they won't.
that?
If you do not have the rapport or the attraction, it does not need to come up on the first date. It does need to come up by the third date, right? Like it does, because by the third date, you're deciding if you can make something of this.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't have to say, why'd you get divorced?
Well, let's move on to the second date. What are the three mistakes? So the first one, you say, don't agree to or don't ask to go someplace that's loud. Don't go to theater, don't go to a movie, etc., where you really can't talk.
You really need to get to know the person. And people hate me for saying this, but also don't drink.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody agrees. But if you're gonna drink one drink and keep your head on
Mm-hmm.
it all times. It just isn't conducive to the purpose. The time for you to consume entertainment together is the eighth date, the 10th
Mm-hmm.
date. In the first three dates, you should be obsessed with learning about one another and how you would get along.
Well, and that leads into, don't kiss or more, don't have sex on the second date, which a lot of people do. And it never really leads to a serious, well, I shouldn't say it never does, but it more often than not, it does
It's not
not
your
lead
best
to a
bet.
serious, yeah, it's
It's
not your
not your
best
be- it's
bet.
not your best bet.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
men and women have different reasons for having sex early. There could be the reason that you just want to have sex. If you just want to have sex, either hire it or be very clear upfront, not have sex with somebody who is looking for their long-term person and
Yeah.
who really wants to get to know you. Conversely, a lot of women will have sex well, number one, because they're drunk and they just aren't actually making good judgment and they feel flattered.
Right.
Or they will do it to try to increase the heart H for him. That
Mm-hmm.
doesn't work. It's a bad
Mm-hmm.
bet. It's a bad bet.
Mm-hmm.
The man's trying to increase the hoo-ha rating for her. She's trying to increase the heart rating for him. Again, it's a bad idea. No one ever regrets waiting. Especially what I don't want you to do is kiss if you're not intending to take the relationship further, which people do, especially when they're drinking. Because if
Mm-hmm.
somebody offers it, how are you going to say no? It's a recoverable mistake, but it wastes your time. It makes you fatigued. It makes you trust yourself less. It gives you bad ideas about what dating is. So my rule for my daters is no kissing unless you're going to have another date, unless you like the person, no kissing.
Yeah, what's funny about our discussion is that it sounds like we're in high school, and it doesn't. It doesn't change, especially if that's the last time you dated was back in high school or college. You're right back there.
It's true. We haven't grown up.
What do you mean by don't leave with any mystery? That was point three.
So again, remember, I'm all about less fatigue, less
Mhm,
disappointment. So
mhm,
what I can't stand is when, and I'm sorry, it is usually women, but men too, is the, either the man will go, do you want to go out again? And she'll go, I'll get back to you. Or he won't say anything at the end of the date. She won't say anything at the end of the day. And it's like, was it good? Did we have a good time? Are we going out again? And the amount of time, and then you're all weird on the sites because you're like, am I seeing, is this happening? Again, just the amount of exhaustion and drama is resolvable with the following rule. And that is you don't leave the date without saying how you think it went.
mhm,
If you're the woman, you say, I had a really good time. If you ask me out again, I'd say yes. Boom. Now you're going to find out. You've showed your cards. He now has to
mhm,
show his cards. If you're the man, I had a really good time. Would you like to go out again? And you will know by the answer,
mhm,
right? If it's not yes, or if
mhm,
it's not, how about Thursday? That's probably a no. Assume it's a no. If it
mhm.
becomes a yes in a text the next day, fabulous. But don't go home wondering. Don't go home wondering.
Yeah, that is so important. So important how you leave people wandering. And it can be really cruel.
It's
it,
bad
yeah.
karma. I really believe dating has a
Mhm.
lot of karma to it, and you want to treat
Yes,
other people the way you would like to be treated.
exactly. Well, let's move on to the third date. Now, the third date is like that's the ultimate date. According to you, I agree with you that when you got to the third date, there's interest there. And you need to get to some serious stuff. And the first one you say is, or the mistake would be avoiding the deal breaker questions, avoiding talking about, well, what really matters to you.
And this is really hard because
Mhm,
people don't. The first and second date, if you're getting a first date and a second date after a video chat, is because
mhm,
you're attracted, you want to hook up, your head is happy with how they look. And if you got a second date, you're getting along, you feel good. And if you're in a third date, all of that should be going very well. And so
mhm,
the idea of now bringing up, I have herpes, or I have a kid at home still, or I have to
mhm,
take care of my sick mother, I can't leave the state. I actually don't have any retirement savings,
mhm,
or I'm out of the country half the year. My estimate is that most people have about seven of those things. I call it liabilities, right? Between health issues, lifestyle issues, I'm allergic to cats, bad
mhm,
personality traits, bad habits, and vices.
mhm,
Nobody doesn't have them, right? So if you're on a third date and you're not hearing about the liabilities and
mhm.
not telling about yours, you don't know. And I do not recommend going on a fourth date and falling for somebody whose liabilities you don't know.
Yeah.
Because the person who is right for you is a person that has seven liabilities that are either adorable to you,
Mhm,
acceptable to you,
mhm.
or you can work with them. If you're not talking about the liabilities, if you're not bringing it up, you're investing in crypto.
You can think, or like this came to my head, so I'm sure it did with others, is that, well, aren't some of these, do you really have to do with that early? Is it, do you maybe do get to know each other a little bit more and then talk about this? But the thing is, if it's something that is going to eventually come up, it'll be an issue when it comes up if it's going to be an issue now.
I think it's truly disrespectful to decide when to tell someone if they're falling in love with you. I mean, you know how you feel when you find out later someone
Yeah.
lied or withheld information. It doesn't feel good. It almost invalidates all the time you've spent together pretending you
Mm-hmm.
do know the truth. And again, when the person is the right match, and I know this from my personal experience and many other people's, when the person is a match, they're going to be like, what's the next one? Okay, I
Mm-hmm.
can handle it. Oh,
Yeah.
how are we going to handle your mother? How are we going to handle your kid? How are we going to handle your prostate? How are we going to, because they're in love.
No, good. It's a great point, and so important to think about. So important to think about. The last two that, well, we've talked about this a lot already, but having sex before commitment. By the third date, you might have long term potential.
Yeah, and people don't like this either, right? People don't like that I only give three dates to figure out if the person is eight or above in all three ages. People
Mm-hmm.
don't like that I say don't drink, right? This is dating like you mean it. If you just want to waste time and get tired, do it your way. Like this
Mm-hmm.
is not moral, right? This
Mm-hmm.
is just about saving time and disappointment and heartbreak. They also don't like when I say literally don't have sex until you're monogamous, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
different than saying don't have sex till the fourth date. I'm saying
Mm-hmm.
you have three dates to decide, would you like to try monogamy with this person? You have three dates to find out if they're interested in monogamy or not.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if you are and they're not, that's a deal breaker, abort the
Mm-hmm.
mission. But if you both want to try monogamy, that's when you would say, you don't need to be monogamous with me now. We just got to know each other, but
Mm-hmm.
I wait to have sex till I'm monogamous. Important to me, right? It's a big step for me, and
Yeah.
I want to have a certain level of intimacy and before, during, and after.
Yeah, and it's a sign of a or a long-term relationship, that there's long-term relationship potential, because maybe even you wouldn't have, maybe you'd be monogamous with somebody you want to be with, but not necessarily with somebody you wouldn't. So
Well,
it's an
again,
important point.
you're showing your hand, and then you'll see their hand. And if they run away, it's because they thought three dates would be enough to get laid, and they were wrong. Or they might go, well, let's be monogamous because I'm dying to have sex with you.
Well, finally, oh boy, this, my goodness, time goes by fast talking with you. Continuing if you aren't into it, that is a big mistake. If you really, you know that it's not going to work, or something really bothering you, but you still go out, you still keep
It is the
going.
biggest mistake we make because we do
Mm-hmm.
not want to be alone. And that desire to not be alone translates into picking wrong and then staying, which is
Hmm.
just so dangerous to your fatigue and
Yeah.
and your heart. If you're not looking for the same things, if your dreams and goals don't intersect, you got to call it by date three, even though it means you're going to go back to date one again with someone new.
Well, Laurie, what a spunky discussion. I learned a lot as usual. I love these discussions. I hope our viewers did as well. If you want to get in touch with Laurie directly, all her contact information is in the show notes below. You can, yeah, coach with Laurie, especially if you know some of these things here you want to know a little bit more about. And I will link to our first conversation because that really gives a good
Yeah.
basis to what we just discussed. So, Laurie, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on Second Act, and I look forward to our next discussion on Second Act TV.